To be human is to be fundamentally tethered to the dirt. Our entire psychological architecture is built upon the existence of a horizon, the comforting pull of gravity, and the illusion of a blue sky. We look up at the stars and we see a sprawling, terrifying ocean, but we take comfort in the knowledge that we are safely anchored to an island. We call that island a home. But what happens to the human mind when that anchor is permanently severed? What happens when a man spends a century commanding a flying cathedral of adamantium, looking down at those fragile islands from the absolute freezing dark of the void? He did not despise the planets he was sworn to protect. He simply forgot what they were. Today on HaqqRift, we dissect the chilling psychological detachment of an Imperial Voidship Commander. We will explore the tragedy of a man tasked with defending the million worlds of the Imperium, who eventually realized that a planet is not a sanctuary. It is just a logistical waypoint waiting to be destroyed. To understand the profound existential alienation of a veteran Lord Captain of the Imperial Navy, we must first completely discard the terrestrial perspective. A baseline human lives their entire life within the biosphere of a single world. They build houses, they cultivate histories, and they invest their souls into the soil beneath their feet. But a Lord Captain lives within a sealed, heavily armored ecosystem that dwarfs the grandest hive cities. His cruiser is a leviathan of war, stretching for kilometers, populated by tens of thousands of crew members who will be born, serve, and die without ever once breathing unrecycled air. For the captain, the ship is not a vehicle. The ship is reality. The void is the natural state of the cosmos. Planets are merely temporary, anomalous interruptions in the dark. This total immersion in the void fundamentally rewrites the captain's neurocognitive processing of scale and value. When a newly commissioned young lieutenant looks at the tactical hololith and sees a vibrant green agri-world, he might feel a pang of nostalgia. He might see fields of golden wheat, sprawling oceans, and the innocent billions who depend on the Navy for their survival. The veteran Lord Captain looks at the exact same hololith and experiences absolutely zero emotional resonance. His seasoned mind instantly strips away the clouds, the oceans, and the culture, reducing the entire biosphere to a series of cold, mathematical data points. He sees a Class 3 caloric output center, a localized gravity well that will cost 4,000 megatons of promethium fuel to orbit, and a potential staging ground for a planetary assault. He does not see a world, he sees an inventory. This psychological sterilization is an absolute tactical necessity. The Imperium of Man is a logistical empire engaged in an endless multi-front apocalypse. If a Voidship Commander allows himself to view every planet as a precious, irreplaceable home, he will be instantly paralyzed by the moral weight of his command. He must authorize orbital bombardments that will instantly vaporize continents to deny a foothold to the Tyranids. He must abandon besieged worlds to the predations of the Drukhari, simply because the sector fleet requires his ship to defend a more strategically valuable Forge World 3 systems away. To make these agonizing calculations without going completely insane, the captain must forcefully amputate his understanding of home. He must view the destruction of a planet not as a heartbreaking tragedy, but as a mere negative fluctuation on a logistical ledger. The manifestation of this detachment creates a terrifying, almost alien divide between the Lord Captain and the planetary governors he interacts with. When a cruiser arrives in orbit above a threatened hive world, the ruling governor will often open a Vox channel, frantically pleading for salvation. The governor will speak of his world's glorious thousands of years of history, its sacred cathedrals, and the unique, irreplaceable spirit of its people. The Lord Captain sits upon his command throne, listening to this desperate weeping plea with the polite, uncomprehending boredom of a man listening to a foreign language. The concepts of culture and spirit are invisible to his tactical auspex arrays. He interrupts the governor's poetic lamentation to demand the exact, localized anti-air capabilities of the capital city and the maximum conscription yield of the lower hives. He is a surgeon speaking to a piece of meat. Over the decades, this perspective mutates into a quiet, deeply ingrained contempt for terrestrial life. The Lord Captain begins to view planets not as strongholds, but as fundamental liabilities. A planet is a static target. It cannot evade an incoming macro-cannon volley. It cannot initiate a warp jump to escape a tyrannid hive fleet. It sits there, bound by the pathetic laws of gravity, helplessly waiting for the universe to kill it. The captain looks down at the sprawling continents and feels a cold, arrogant superiority. He pities the billions of souls trapped on the surface, tethered to the dirt like chained animals. He believes that true freedom, true power, and true survival can only be achieved by shedding the planetary cradle and embracing the infinite, freezing mobility of the void. This is the ultimate silent tragedy of the Imperial Navy's finest commanders. The God Emperor built the fleets to be the great shield of humanity, the invincible armada that stands between the million worlds and the encroaching dark. But the men who command that shield have been forced to gaze into the dark for so long that they have completely forgotten what they are protecting. The Lord Captain has successfully excised the terrestrial delusion from his mind. He is the perfect, flawless guardian of the Imperium, completely willing to sacrifice his life and his ship for the survival of the human race. But if you were to ask him what exactly a human being is, or why their dirt-covered homes are worth dying for, he would have absolutely no idea. To truly measure the depth of the Lord Captain's psychological void, one must observe him during the execution of the Imperium's ultimate sanction, Exterminatus. When an inquisitor formally requests the absolute destruction of a corrupted world, the event is steeped in profound, agonizing theological weight. The priests of the Ministorum weep and chant dirges for the billions of souls about to be forcefully evicted from the material realm. The inquisitor who gives the order carries the heavy, spiritual burden of the atrocity, rationalizing the genocide as a necessary amputation to save the broader body of mankind. But the Lord Captain, the man who actually commands the firing of the cyclonic torpedoes, experiences an entirely different, chillingly mundane reality. He feels absolutely nothing at all. As the apocalyptic countdown echoes across the bridge, the captain does not stare out the observation blisters to watch the planet burn. He does not engage in solemn reflection. He is staring at a tactical data slate, irritated by the minor inefficiency the maneuver introduces to his patrol route. The destruction of a planet requires his ship to break orbit, adjust void shields to deflect the incoming planetary debris, and burn valuable promethium to counteract the sudden gravitational shift caused by the world's crust fracturing. To him, initiating Exterminatus is not a dark, gothic tragedy. It is an irritating administrative hurdle. He views the vaporization of a continent with the exact same emotional engagement a scribe uses to cross out a mathematically incorrect line on a ledger. When the torpedoes finally strike and the atmosphere ignites into a global firestorm, the resulting shockwave gently rattles the heavy adamantium of the ship's hull. The bridge crew might visibly flinch, crossing their chests with the sign of the Aquila, terrified by the sheer, unadulterated wrath of the Emperor made manifest. The Lord Captain merely taps the armrest of his command throne, annoyed by the vibration. He immediately barks orders to the engine seers to recalibrate the gyroscopic stabilizers. He looks at the screaming, burning sphere of rock below, and his only concern is ensuring that the radioactive ash cloud does not clog the primary exhaust vents of his plasma drives. This terrifying detachment fundamentally separates him even from the cold sociopathy of the Inquisition. An Inquisitor destroys a world out of fanatical hatred for chaos, or an unyielding, zealous love for the Emperor. The Inquisitor possesses a motive fueled by passion. The Lord Captain possesses no passion. He destroys the world simply because the mathematical coordinates were uploaded to his targeting cogitators, and his duty dictates he press the rune of execution. He is infinitely colder than the men who command him. He is the perfect executioner because he fundamentally does not recognize the humanity of the victim. You cannot feel guilt for breaking a toy if you never believed the toy was alive in the first place. This absolute devaluation of planetary bodies eventually corrupts his perception of holy terror itself. To the trillions of faithful across the galaxy, terror is the beating heart of humanity, the sacred, untouchable cradle of the species. The Lord Captain, however, views terror strictly as a massive, highly inefficient logistical bottleneck. He respects it only because it houses the Astronomicon, the psychic beacon required for warp navigation. If the Adeptus Mechanicus could somehow extract the Golden Throne and place it upon a mobile, heavily armored void station, the Lord Captain would mathematically calculate that terror is completely obsolete and could be safely abandoned. He has stripped away the theology of the Imperium and reduced the entire galactic empire to a supply chain. He achieves the ultimate, horrifying perfection of the Imperial war machine. He is a man who can orchestrate the death of 1 trillion souls without experiencing a single micro-fluctuation in his baseline heart rate. He does not hate the heretic, the mutant, or the alien. He does not love the citizen, the priest, or the soldier. He only loves the cold, unbroken hum of his plasma reactor, the structural integrity of his void shields, and the infinite, frictionless silence of the deep dark. He is a ghost haunting a machine, a phantom who has successfully amputated his own soul so that his hands will never ever tremble on the firing controls. The true paradoxical terror of the Lord Captain's existence is revealed only when he is violently removed from his natural habitat. On exceedingly rare occasions, military protocol or grand strategic conclaves require the commander to physically disembark his vessel and step foot onto the surface of a planetary capital. For a baseline human void sailor, returning to a planet is a moment of profound joy, a chance to feel the wind, smell unrecycled air, and walk beneath a blue sky. But for the veteran Lord Captain, descending into a planetary atmosphere triggers a profound, suffocating psychological crisis. He does not experience nostalgia. He experiences absolute, debilitating, cosmic agoraphobia. As the armored transport shuttle breaches the upper atmosphere, the captain sits rigidly in his harness, his knuckles white. The turbulence of re-entry is not a standard operational variable. It is unpredictable weather. To a man whose entire reality has been governed by flawlessly regulated artificial life support systems, the concept of weather is an abomination. He steps off the ramp onto the landing pad, and the first gust of natural wind hits his face. He does not find it refreshing. He processes the wind as an uncontrolled atmospheric anomaly, a failure in the sector's environmental containment protocols. The air smells of soil, vegetation, and billions of unwashed bodies. To his sterile, void-conditioned senses, the planet simply smells like a rotting, uncontrolled biological infection. The true panic sets in when he looks upward. A human looks at the open sky and feels a sense of infinite freedom. The Lord Captain looks at the sky and feels completely, nakedly exposed. On the bridge of his cruiser, the sky is a multi-meter thick ceiling of blessed adamantium, reinforced by overlapping, multi-layered energy shields. The planetary sky is nothing but a fragile, invisible layer of gas. He stares at the clouds, and his tactical instincts scream in horror. There is no sensory grid. There is no macro-auspex array predicting threats 1,000,000 kilometers away. An enemy orbital strike could penetrate that pathetic blue ceiling in a fraction of a second, and he would have absolutely no warning. The open sky is not a canopy of freedom, it is a massive, gaping vulnerability. This sensory overload is violently compounded by the physical sensation of the ground beneath his boots. The earth is soft. It yields slightly under his weight. It is composed of dirt and organic decay. He is accustomed to the unyielding, mathematically perfect rigidity of metal decking. Walking on soil makes him feel as though the structural integrity of the entire world is compromised, as if he might fall straight through the crust at any moment. He walks with a stiff, unnatural gait, his posture rigid, desperately trying to maintain his balance on a sphere that is spinning through space without any visible thrusters or gyroscopic stabilizers. He views the planet as a structurally flawed, highly dangerous vessel that is completely out of control. His interactions with the planetary nobility during these ground-side excursions are a study in profound, mutual contempt. The planetary governors proudly showcase their sprawling estates, their massive stone fortresses, and their deep-rooted ancestral lineage. The Lord Captain listens to their boasting, internally calculating that a single standard yield lance strike from his cruiser, currently sitting in orbit, could instantly reduce their 1,000-year-old fortress into a puddle of glowing slag. He looks at these proud, powerful men and women and sees children playing with sandcastles on a beach, entirely oblivious to the apocalyptic tsunami currently building in the dark waters of the void. Their arrogance is hilariously pathetic to him. The only moment of genuine emotional release the Lord Captain experiences is the moment his boots finally strike the metal deck of his own ship's hangar bay. As the heavy, multi-ton blast doors violently cycle shut, sealing out the atmosphere of the planet, he lets out a long, slow breath. The sterile, metallic smell of ozone and promethium floods his lungs, and his heart rate finally stabilizes. The low, rhythmic vibration of the plasma drive hums through the soles of his boots, grounding him in the only reality he trusts. He realizes that the ship is no longer merely his command. It is his physical body. The void is his true home, and the planets are just the filthy, dangerous shores he is forced to occasionally glance at from the safety of the deep ocean. If the Lord Captain views the millions of worlds within the Imperium as mere logistical waypoints, one must ask the terrifying question: how does he perceive the 100,000 human souls trapped inside the hull of his own ship? A standard naval commander views his crew as a sworn brotherhood, a fragile biological family navigating the hostile dark together. He learns the names of his senior officers. He mourns the casualties of boarding actions, and he understands that the ship is a vessel designed to carry humanity. The veteran Lord Captain violently inverts this dynamic. He does not believe the ship exists to serve the crew. He believes the crew exists solely to serve the ship. They are not men and women. They are simply the soft biological components of a sprawling adamantium organism. To his deeply alienated mind, the cruiser is the true living entity. The colossal plasma reactor is the beating heart, the complex network of promethium pipes are the veins, and the bridge cogitators are the brain. The human crew members are merely the microscopic, replaceable cells required to keep the larger organism functioning. He observes the thousands of press-ganged laborers hauling macro-cannon shells on the gun decks, their bodies breaking under the immense physical strain, and he feels absolutely no pity. He views their ruptured spines and crushed limbs as standard mechanical wear and tear. When a biological component fails, it is simply incinerated and replaced by a fresh unit from the nearest planetary inventory. He is managing an ecosystem where human blood is functionally indistinguishable from engine coolant. This chilling utilitarianism dictates his response to internal catastrophic damage. Imagine a scenario where a Tyranid boarding pod breaches the lower engineering decks. A conventional captain would immediately dispatch the armsmen, frantically attempting to establish choke points to save the trapped crew members, viewing the loss of human life as a tragedy to be mitigated. The Lord Captain does not hesitate for a single microsecond. He calculates the propagation rate of the alien infection, determines that a protracted firefight will decrease overall engine efficiency by 3%, and calmly reaches for the command console. He seals the bulkheads and intentionally vents the entire sector into the freezing vacuum of space. He murders 5,000 of his own loyal crew members instantly, prioritizing the structural integrity of a single plasma conduit over their collective existence. The psychological atmosphere this creates among the crew is one of absolute, suffocating terror mixed with fanatical religious awe. The crew does not love their captain. They worship him as the wrathful, unblinking avatar of the ship itself. They live in the lightless, dripping bowels of the cruiser, entirely conditioned to accept their own absolute worthlessness. They know that if the ship requires their mass sacrifice to survive a macro battery broadside, the captain will spend their lives with the casual indifference of a man spending loose change. They are the biological ablative armor of the vessel, existing solely to absorb the trauma that the adamantium hull cannot. The Lord Captain has successfully institutionalized sociopathy, turning an entire floating city into a monument to human expendability. When compared to the commanders of the Astra Militarum, the Lord Captain's detachment reaches a level of cosmic absurdity. A Lord General of the Imperial Guard might order a suicidal charge that kills 100,000 men, but he must look those men in the eye. He must hear the artillery, smell the mud, and witness the visceral horror of the slaughter. The Voidship Commander is completely insulated from the consequences of his arithmetic. When he vents a deck, there is no screaming on the bridge. There is no blood on his polished boots. There is only the quiet, sterile blinking of a green rune turning red on his hololithic display, indicating a sudden drop in localized biomass. He conducts a symphony of mass death from inside a perfectly soundproofed, climate-controlled box. This is the ultimate, unspoken horror of the Imperial Navy. It requires millions of human beings to operate the majestic fleets that protect the stars, but it demands that the men who command those fleets entirely forget what a human being is. The Lord Captain is the perfect, flawless asset of the Departamento Munitorum because he has completely sterilized his own conscience. He is not a man commanding a ship. He is a ship that happens to possess a human brain. He sits upon his throne, a tyrant of the void, completely blind to the agonizing irony that in his obsessive quest to protect humanity from the monsters in the dark, he transformed himself into the most terrifying monster of all. To fully comprehend the depth of his psychological alienation, we must examine the Lord Captain through the predatory, metaphysical lens of the immaterium. The ruinous powers of chaos are parasitic entities that feed entirely upon the emotional resonance and earthly desires of mortal souls. To corrupt a powerful imperial leader, the demons of the warp require a tether, a psychological hook buried in the material universe. They offer a planetary governor absolute power over his world. They offer a general the bloody glory of 100 conquered continents. They offer a civilian the endless, intoxicating pleasures of the flesh. But when the eye of chaos turns upon the veteran Lord Captain, it encounters a profound, deeply frustrating vacuum. Consider the approach of Slaanesh, the Prince of Excess, The demon attempts to seduce the captain by projecting visions of unimaginable terrestrial opulence. It shows him sprawling palaces of marble and gold, endless banquets of the finest delicacies, and a life of absolute unbridled physical pleasure on a paradise world. The Lord Captain looks at the visions and feels nothing but intense, clinical disgust. A palace is just a stationary target tethered to the dirt. A feast is a biological inefficiency that requires waste processing. He has spent a century breathing recycled air and eating nutrient paste while commanding the localized firepower of a small sun. The concept of luxury is utterly meaningless to a man whose only metric for joy is the absolute mathematical perfection of an orbital bombardment. Slaanesh starves in his presence, completely unable to tempt a man who despises gravity. Tzeentch, the architect of fate, attempts to exploit his ambition. The warp whispers promises of vast, sector-spanning empires, offering the captain the opportunity to rule over thousands of worlds, to be worshipped as a god-king by trillions of terrestrial subjects. The captain processes this offer and mathematically categorizes it as a severe demotion. Why would he want to rule a stagnant, immobile empire of dirt? Ruling a planet requires administration, diplomacy, and dealing with the chaotic, unpredictable variables of planetary weather and civilian populations. He already commands a mobile, flawless, self-contained reality that can travel between the stars and extinguish a biosphere with a single command. The demon of ambition realizes, with cosmic frustration, that it cannot offer the captain anything more powerful than what the Imperium has already given him. Even Nurgle, the Plague Lord, finds no purchase. Nurgle preys upon the mortal fear of decay, the desperate desire to escape the inevitability of death and disease that plagues all biological life. But the Lord Captain has already psychologically transcended his own biology. He does not fear disease because he views his own body merely as an irritating, temporary casing for his tactical intellect. If his flesh begins to fail, he will simply have the Adeptus Mechanicus surgically replace it with cybernetics. He does not fear death because he does not consider himself truly alive in the biological sense. He is an extension of the ship's cogitators. Nurgle cannot exploit the fear of biological mortality in a man who already firmly believes he is made of adamantium. This creates a terrifying, localized anomaly within the warp. The Lord Captain is not a blank or a pariah. He possesses a soul, but his soul has been so completely flattened by the crushing, infinite scale of the void that it generates almost no emotional signature. He's practically invisible to the predators of the immaterium. He survives the psychic hazards of warp travel, not through the fiery, zealous faith of a space marine or the rigid, dogmatic prayers of a priest. He survives purely through absolute, sociopathic apathy. The demons claw at the hull of his ship, screaming into his mind, and he ignores them with the exact same administrative annoyance he uses to ignore a localized drop in cabin pressure. He is the ultimate paradoxical heresy against the nature of the universe. The Imperium preaches that faith is the only armor against chaos. The Lord Captain proves that there is another, far darker path to purity: absolute, unconditional nihilism. He has not fallen to chaos because there is simply nothing left inside him for chaos to corrupt. He has achieved a state of terrifying, artificial enlightenment. He is a man who has stared into the screaming, infinite abyss of the universe for so long that the abyss simply got bored and looked away. He drifts through the galaxy, a perfect, uncorrupted, untouchable ghost, completely safe from the monsters in the dark, because he has forgotten how to care about anything they could possibly take from him. The terminal velocity of the Lord Captain's psychological alienation inevitably results in a catastrophic inversion of his sacred duty. The Imperial Navy was founded upon a singular, foundational mandate: The ships exist as a shield to protect the vulnerable, static worlds of humanity from the horrors of the dark. The fleet is the sacrificial weapon. The planet is the precious cargo. But after a century of viewing planets purely as caloric output centers and strategic liabilities, the Lord Captain's logic engines quietly, fundamentally rewrite this equation. He concludes that the fragile, dirt-bound planets are merely temporary, inefficient resource nodes whose sole cosmic purpose is to refuel, repair, and sustain the majestic, eternal reality of his voidship. He no longer serves the Imperium. He believes the Imperium exists to serve the ship. This philosophical mutation is violently tested when a splinter fleet of the Tyrannid menace descends upon a heavily populated, highly cultured, civilized world. The planetary defense lasers are failing, the orbital defense platforms are dark, and billions of terrified citizens are looking to the sky, praying for the flash of Imperial void shields. The Lord Captain's cruiser arrives at the edge of the system. A standard, heroic naval commander would instantly order the fleet to punch through the Tyrannid blockade, willingly taking massive hull damage to deploy troop transports and evacuate the hive cities. He would view the sacrifice of his ship as a glorious, necessary trade for the survival of the human species. The veteran Lord Captain analyzes the exact same tactical hololith and arrives at a profoundly different, terrifyingly clinical conclusion. He calculates the mass of the Tyrannid bioships, the projected trajectory of their boarding spores, and the exact mathematical degradation his cruiser's adamantium plating will suffer in a close-quarters engagement. He determines that attempting to save the planet will result in a 43% reduction in his ship's overall combat efficiency and a high probability of critical plasma reactor failure. To his sterilized mind, a highly advanced mobile Imperial cruiser is mathematically vastly more valuable than a static ball of rock populated by easily replaceable biological units. Without a single micro-fluctuation of hesitation, he orders the helmsman to reverse thrust. He watches the planet die on the Auspex scanners with the cold, unblinking detachment of an astronomer observing a distant supernova. He listens to the frantic, screaming Vox transmissions of the planetary governor begging for salvation, and he simply mutes the channel to reduce bridge audio clutter. He is not retreating out of cowardice. He is retreating out of a twisted, absolute dedication to asset preservation. He protects the sword by entirely refusing to swing it. He has successfully convinced himself that by letting billions of humans be consumed by the Great Devourer, he has achieved a flawless tactical victory simply because his ship did not suffer a scratch. He has completely divorced the concept of humanity from actual human beings. The ultimate, horrific endpoint of his existence is physical assimilation. As his biological body finally begins to fail under the weight of centuries, he does not retire to a planetary estate to die. He refuses to allow his consciousness to be tethered to the dirt even in death. He orders the tech priests to surgically enter his failing, withered frame inside a heavy amniotic mind impulse unit tank, hardwiring his cerebral cortex directly into the bridge cogitators. He physically ceases to be a man commanding a ship and literally becomes the ship. His nervous system merges with the plasma drives. His eyes become the macro Auspex arrays. He achieves the ultimate sociopathic dream of the transhumanist void sailor. He permanently deletes his own biology to become a creature of pure, freezing iron. He drifts into the infinite dark, an immortal, perfect machine of war. He is the ultimate guardian of the galaxy, completely untouchable by the corruption of chaos, immune to fear and devoid of biological weakness. Yet he is entirely cosmically useless. He sails through the ashes of the 41st millennium, commanding firepower capable of shattering moons, but he will never fire a single shot to save a human life, because he has completely forgotten what a human life is worth. He is a ghost, haunting an adamantium shell, eternally protecting a galaxy of spreadsheets, completely blind to the agonizing irony that he sacrificed his soul to protect a home he no longer believes in. We observe the Lord Captain entirely entombed within his own tactical isolation, and we shudder at the cold, mechanical horror of his existence. We view this profound alienation as a brilliant, dystopian extreme, safely contained within the vacuum of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. We close the lore archives, entirely confident that our feet are firmly planted on the ground, and our connections to our homes and our humanity are secure. But strip away the void shields and the plasma drives, and look closely at the architecture of our modern, hyper-optimized lives. How often do we become the sociopathic void commanders of our own existence? We live in an era that aggressively conditions us to view every aspect of our lives through the sterile lens of a spreadsheet. We view our homes not as sanctuaries of memory and love, but as real estate assets to be leveraged. We view our friendships and relationships not as vital human connections, but as networking opportunities to be curated. We optimize our schedules, we track our caloric output, and we violently amputate the messy, inefficient variables of human emotion just to ensure we maintain our daily productivity quotas. We build massive psychological void ships of career ambition and digital isolation, pulling ourselves further and further away from the raw, unpolished dirt of genuine, vulnerable living. We become so obsessed with protecting the trajectory of our lives that we entirely forget how to actually live them. We stare at the screens, calculating the metrics of our own survival, completely unaware that we have successfully optimized our souls out of existence. If your mind has recognized the cold, metallic hum of the spreadsheet echoing in your own daily routine, if you refuse to let your life be reduced to a series of logistical waypoints, anchor your humanity here. Strike the subscribe rune before you forget the feeling of the earth. Leave a raw, inefficient, deeply human transmission in the archives below to prove your heart is still beating. And share this signal with those who are mistaking their isolation for success. In a universe obsessed with absolute flawless optimization, never forget that the most beautiful parts of the human experience are fundamentally inefficient. Until next time, step out of the bridge, feel the gravity, and remember, a ship is safe in the void, but that is not what ships were built for.